Today we're going to learn more about gouache and how to work with it and do some practice exercises. We will be working with two brands of gouache. One of them is Winsor & Newton. That will be the professional gouache we'll be using in class. The other one is Arteza, which is more of a student grade. You will be using the Arteza at home for your practice. Most gouache come in tubes, and so it will be a wetter consistency. When you put your gouache down on your palette, you just want to put a little at a time, especially if you're just going to practice. And then you want to take a drop of water and try to mix it as a creamy consistency. But in class, we will be using our paint in this plastic container, and so it'll probably be dry every class. So what you need to do is just get your spray bottle and spray once and try to activate it that way with your brush. And again, you want to have like a milky, creamy, thick, creamy consistency. And you can paint right out of your plastic container like this if the subject you're painting is not too large. Or you may feel like you need more control. You can go ahead and add the gouache on your mixing palette like this. I want to use gouache as an opaque medium, so I will not be adding more water to this palette. I'm only going to be adding more paint. Once your gouache paint is nice and creamy and ready to go, I want you to just start painting shapes on a page in your watercolor pad. You're just going to be playing with the paint, filling it out, and you would want to do thin layer, thicker layers, and the thicker layers would be just painting one layer, waiting for it to dry, and painting another layer on top, and just have fun with it. Everyone will have a color mixing chart with the colors that you are using in class. And so if you need a particular color and you don't have it there, then you can go ahead and look at that chart and mix those two colors and try to get that color that you're looking for. And so this is an opportunity to practice that as well. You do not want to dirty your gouache paint in your plastic containers. So make sure you rinse your brush out very well to remove all the color out before you dip it back into another color in your plastic containers. I'm using a different brand of gouache for this purple, and I noticed that it wasn't as opaque as I would like it to be. So if you come across a problem like this where you put down your first layer and you can still see the paper underneath, all you need to do is wait for it to dry and then add a second layer on top, and then it will become opaque. So now it's time to create a new tint of a color. You want to do that with the white gouache. So go ahead and just place some white gouache on your palette and then just touch a little bit of the color that you want to make. So I went ahead and put a little bit of red and I created a pink color. The one thing about gouache though, when you mix with white and you think that's a perfect tint, think again, because it will dry darker. So if you really want it to be lighter and you think it's perfect, add more white and then it might be perfect then. So now it's time to practice creating details on the shapes that we have already placed on our watercolor paper. And so if it's a dark shape, go ahead and use your lighter color. So I went ahead and used my lighter pink color because I know that will show up against a darker background. And I created lines. You can create dots, swirls, anything that you want. But what you're doing is you're just practicing with a light touch. You want to create those details. You don't want to mess around with the paint underneath. So you just make sure you have enough paint on your brush and a light touch, but nice and sturdy. I also created a darker color out of blue and red, so I'm going to go ahead and use that color. to put darker details on top of the shapes. Gouache can go a long way. I'm filling this whole circle up with just one pickup of paint on that brush. So this is a fun exercise. Make sure the background is dry and go ahead and add some blue. If you created a light pink background, you can add blue. You just want to think of the color wheel and add a color that's going to pop against the background. And this is a fun exercise to do because it'll help you practice and get better with gouache and over layering. I just wanted to show you my gouache setup. I went ahead and put my gouache in this container, plastic container, and there's a lot of gouache in there. This is a good idea if you use gouache all the time. But lately I've been using watercolor, so my gouache dried really bad. And it can also grow mold, so you gotta be careful. That's why it's not good to put a lot of gouache in a container unless you're gonna use it every day. But again, I have to spray it, I have to let it soak, I have to reactivate it with my brush, and I just gotta keep trying to pull out that milky, thick cream consistency. It's gonna be thick enough to stick on your brush, and it's not going to drip, and it's also not going to be too thick, so you don't want any globs. You always want it to go on smoothly, just like butter. This is the Hemi Jelly Gouache, and it's a lot cheaper than my gouache. It's student grade, but it's really good to practice with, and you can still do professional stuff with it. Again, I wasn't using it because I've started using my professional gouache, so this one became dried up as well. The same thing with this, I have to spray it to reactivate it. And here's the good thing about gouache. If you have gouache on your palette and it dries, you can spray it and reactivate it and use it again, just like watercolor. I don't know if we'll be doing that in class because I'm not sure if it'll just create a big mess, but this is definitely something you can do at home. When you're practicing at home, one of the things I'd like you to do is go ahead and learn to create different tints of a color. As you know, with watercolor, we just add more water and the paint becomes lighter and lighter. And we can do the same thing with gouache. We can lighten it up with water. But most people work with gouache with white to create a different tint. And so I also want you to do that. You just start out with a particular color, add a little bit of white, go ahead and paint down your shape, and then add a little bit more white to that same color and paint your next shape, and just keep adding more white until you get to the lightest value. And again, this is just a way to figure out when I want a lighter color, this is how I need to achieve it. It's very important to remember that gouache should have a thick, creamy texture, just like this. You don't want it too thick, you don't want it too thin. Okay, so I think we're ready to start practicing. Again, just paint down shapes and go ahead and let them dry, and once they're dry, you can start adding detail. Just go ahead and have some fun with it. Use a smaller brush for fine detail. And remember, a light touch over the paint is going to be your best bet.